Ever since I converted those 4mm TK tippers to radio control, it occurred to me that I might possibly make a 4mm scale model of my 7mm layout at the end of the line, sort of the end of the line further away, just for fun, for nothing else. So I've been pondering on various aspects. One of the things that is driving this is the fact that the end of the line, it was an interesting layout because actually it did a number of things for the first time. One of them, of course, was radio-controlled lorries interacting with the railway, which certainly hadn't been seen in this country before then. And another was, and not for the first time at all, this had been absolutely been done before, but we had working tippers, tipping wagons on that layout, which on the one side tipped down a chute into standard gauge wagons, and on the other side tipped into a conveyor, which then dumped the coal in that instance into the lorries to be driven off. So yesterday I spent some time working on some Pico wagons, and I've weathered them all up. I haven't a clue whether you can see that nicely, but they're all weathered, and they're also now fully fettled, so they operate nicely. And I'll go into that on another occasion if people are sufficiently interested. But suffice to say, these now operate pretty well and pretty reliably. The other thing we need is a conveyor to lift the coal from the tipping wagon into the back of the 4mm radio control lorry. Now, on the end of the line, 7mm, I used an old Triang Hornby conveyor, which I then converted. Obviously, because I'm looking at doing this in 4mm, I need to be smaller than that. And I can't find anything commercially available that will help me in this. No doubt there might be something, but I can't find it. And I've done a bit of research, and I'm struggling to find people who have done working conveyors in small scales. Now, people have done conveyors which travel, and beautiful jobs they are, but they have loads glued to the bed, as it were, so they don't actually function insofar as getting a load from A to B, but they appear to be. One of the nicest was done many years ago by Roy Link, and he used typewriter ribbon, which is a stroke of genius. And so I bought some typewriter ribbon and did as he suggested and soaked it in white spirit to get rid of the ink. And that gives this actually very usefully grey ribbon. What width is this? Let's have a look and see. It looks about 15mm. And it's half an inch wide, so 12.5mm or so. Very nice and absolutely suitable for what we want. And I thought, well, hey, here we go, because the mechanics aren't too much of a problem. And I thought I should like to make the 3-roller version, and what that does is the 3 rollers, it makes the belt travel in a U shape, and that's what they tend to use for belts travelling a distance, for conveying material over a distance. However, what we're trying to do is a slightly different job, and we're trying to elevate goods. So this is an elevator rather than a conveyor. And there is an important difference. For a start, I realised that where this might be fine for a conveyor, just going along more or less on the flat, it's not going to be any good as an elevator, because of course whatever I'm trying to lift just rolls straight back. There's nothing to hold it at all. Now, to an extent, I had this on the Hornby one, and with the Hornby one, I drew lines of PVA down there to form strakes, and that sort of worked, and we got away with it. I'm not happy doing that on this, so I need a way of creating strakes on this ribbon, or indeed a completely different solution which I haven't come up with. I've looked at rubber tracks, I've looked at timing belts, none of which are particularly suitable for what we want. So I firmly believe that this is the best foundation for the job. So we need to create strakes on this. And I thought long and hard over this yesterday, but eventually came up with a plausible answer. And what it does give us is that. I can't see if you can see it very well, but we have ribbon with rigid strakes on there, and that'll definitely pick up at least some of what's travelling, and of course it retains the flexibility to go around the drums at the end. The question is, how do we do that? Well, the first thing is to create a jig to do it. Now, piece of wood. I chose to have these every 15mm, and basically I cut slots in the timber every 15mm. Because I'm boring, I CNC'd those on my Stepcraft, but actually it would have been just as easy to mark it with a pencil and just cut slots with a fine saw. Wouldn't have been a problem. These are actually 1mm deep, but basic woodwork just creates slots at fixed intervals as accurately as possible, and preferably as a uniform depth as possible. And let's see if I can do some of these in real time. First of all, I'm going to insert a strake in a slot. A strake I've already done in a slot like that, and we'll do another one. Now I'm using there we go, and I'm just putting a bit of weight on the back end just to hold that there. Let me see if I can zoom in to make some of this a little bit clearer. We'll see. You might see a little bit more now. Now I'm using 0.6mm nickel silver wire. Can be brass, doesn't matter. Neither is it critical, it's 0.6 mil, but that suits the size of slot I've got. I'm then just going to put a bend in it, about 12 mil, right angle bend, nothing particularly accurate. And then I've put my super glue somewhere. Where have I put my super glue? I put it back up there. There we go. Just prick it out, make sure it's still flowing. Yeah. And I'm going to put some super glue on that wire, like that. And then I'm going to put it on over the slot and push it down in to self. Whoops. No, in fact that's popped out. So that's a bit less than desirable. That's a shame. That's so that strike's going to be at a slight angle and there's nothing I can do about it. Never mind, worse things happen at sea. And then just snip that off, tuck it back down while I prepare the next one. Lovely. And do another one. So you can see this is going to be a time-consuming job to do a whole belt's worth, but the end result is going to be reasonably practical and reasonably plausible, given the fact there aren't very many. In fact, this is better when I don't have the weight on it. I must remember that. So tuck that back. I'm super gluing both sides because I want the material to adhere all the way around. Like that. Just going to snip that one off shorter. Now, all of these, of course, the wire will stick out slightly at the ends, and when it's all dry we can come back and trim them much more closely to the ribbon. Now I say typewriter ribbon, actually that's really come out a really nice useful grey. It strikes me that normal haberdashery ribbon would probably do equally as well. I've not tried. There you go, just prod that one in as well. Oops. Prod that back. Do one more, and and then we'll ping it out and have a look. Now, I dare say some people will mentally already be second guessing me and saying, oh yes, oh well, this is all very well, but what happens when you put the belt under tension? And it starts pulling all this straight, and you know, the wires will start popping out and all this sort of thing. And my answer is, I've thought about that, and just to describe, I won't do it yet because I've not finished, but we use a second bit of ribbon, and I think probably using Copydex. I obviously haven't tried it yet, but Copydex, a second bit of ribbon on top of the first bit of ribbon, like that. So you've got two layers of ribbon, an upper and a lower, and effectively the bottom one, because it's continuous, that'll take the tension between the rollers, and the ribbon with the strakes effectively comes along for the ride and won't be subjected to undue force by being stretched and pulled, because it's reinforced with a backing which is much tighter, if you see what I mean. So that then should more or less last forever, as it were. Should certainly last the life of the life of the model, if you see what I mean. So that's the theory of it, and I see no reason why it shouldn't work. You can see the ones we've just done, not quite straight and parallel, but they will do. So we've kind of got, well, you can see what we've got, and you can visualize how that's going to work. Hope you find that of interest. Having matched the lengths of conveyor, the inner and outer with the strakes, having matched the lengths exactly, I've now coated them with Copydex, which is a latex glue, and it's sort of recommended for fabrics, which is what this is. And we now have to wait for it to touch dry, which is 15 or 20 minutes according to the instructions, and then offer them up together. Now, latex, dreadful stuff. It sticks on contact, so it'll be a single try in order to get it right, and I've got no leeway on this, so we'll see how it goes. But there we are, we've got the coat on. Let it dry, and then we see what happens. Okay, so the glue dried off, and I then spent a happy 10 minutes trying to manipulate it, which was awkward. However, the result is this track. Track's the wrong word, belt, continuous belt. And it's good and solid. You can see the inside is the plain typewriter ribbon, and if you like, that's taking the load of the end rollers, and then the outside has the strakes on. The plain belt and the straight belt are overlapped by about 1.5 inches to create the joint. I thought that was going to be more of a fiddle than it was. That was actually quite all right to do. That's the joint just there. And that's the other half of it there. Now, I would advise, if anyone's doing this, to make the belt first and then make the rest of the conveyor to fit the belt rather than vice versa. I think trying to make the belt accurately to length frankly would be more problematic. So we have a belt that I'm quite happy to put into service or make a machine to work with it. Now, of course, if you were this is the size a typewriter ribbon is. If you wanted a belt of a different width, you would probably be better off looking into, as I suggested earlier, haberdashery ribbons and choosing an appropriate width ribbon. It could be risky slimming one of these down. You might find the edges start, as it were, unpicking or unthreading, as can happen with fabrics. So, I mean, I would try looking at different width ribbons to suit what you wanted. But hey, frankly, it works. How well it'll pick up materials and carry them up remains to be seen. Obviously, it would only work at a shallow angle. If you wanted a steeper angle, you'd need to increase the depth of the strake, and you would do that by making a bigger saw cut, and where I used 0.6mm wire, you'd have to use a thicker wire to give you a bigger size strake. But there's absolutely no problem in doing that. The practical principle certainly holds good. So that certainly is one way of making an elevator belt for a homemade or a scratch-built conveyor. Hope it's of some use. Cheers.